Welcome to Five Things. And we're after UCLA beats USC 62-33. I'm not going to say that again. But this is Erik McKinney, joined by Marc Kulkin and Greg Katz. And guys, again, not going to go over the score again. Let's jump right into it. And Greg, we'll start with you. As always, our first thing, post-game review. First thing is your player of the game. Again, from a lopsided UCLA win against USC.
Well, I think that, to be honest with you, I didn't really see anybody on the SC side. Maybe Keontae Ingram until he got hurt in the third quarter with the rib injury. I thought he was really demonstrating. He was really at the top of his game. But if we're going to look at it from a total game atmosphere, I guess Dorian Thompson Robinson separated himself, although I guess you could have given it to Casimir Allen or Zach Charbonneau. I mean, take your pick, but I guess DTR was really the one that did the damage, and I too shall not give the final score out because I know that there's women and children possibly watching. I don't want to cause a problem.
Marc, go ahead. Your player of the game from this one.
Yeah, we don't need to, as quickly as you said the score was as fast as the Coliseum took it down off the scoreboards when the game ended. I mean, it was gone within 5 minutes, Greg. I've never seen that before.
You mean that won't be sold as a Christmas gift next year?
No, it was gone. Stats, everything gone. My player of the game, you mentioned Keontae Ingram. I'm going to go with Vavae Malapai. 3 touchdowns, granted, 10 carries, 50 yards, 49 yards, whatever it was. It was just, you could see how much passion and how much effort he played with throughout the game. And not to take anything away from Ingram because he played a tremendous game as well. But just to see Vavae be able to go out his last game against UCLA, to play like that, to get those touchdowns, to be, one of the, I guess, the bright spots on offense this week. So that's my player of the game.
Yeah, no, I'll stick with a USC player too, and Gary Bryant Jr., wide receiver, 9 catches, 161 yards, a touchdown, career high for him in receiving yards, and USC has needed somebody to step up with Drake London out, and this is not, we're not pushing for a playoff spot or anything this year talking about that, but they need a guy next year. They need a guy, going forward, without Drake London. And this was kind of the first step that you saw a guy who's going to be on the team next year take that step and kind of assert himself and do that. And watching him hook up with Jackson Dart and yeah, maybe there's some glimpse that, okay, this could be the start of, next season's passing attack. I know there's still 2 games left, but they had to find a guy that was going to step up a little bit. And it felt like, yeah, maybe if they had given Gary a few more chances earlier in the game and let him stretch it and toss it out to him and let him go get it out there earlier, it could have maybe been different. I think ultimately that final score is probably what it ends up being no matter what happens early in the game. But I thought a good game from Gary Bryant Jr. I'm with you, Marc. I really liked watching Vavae. It's fun to watch him when he gets a chance. And this is a guy whose role has diminished kind of as the year goes along, and Keontae Ingram asserts himself, and Darwin Barlow kind of gets in there as that number 2, but always fun to watch him run against UCLA. Seems to kind of save his best for the Bruins, and for him to get in for 3 touchdowns. Again, not going to mention the score on the other side of it, but 3 touchdowns per bye was a nice thing for him specifically. So player of the game in the bag. Our second thing, the play of the game. Marc, go ahead and go with your play of the game in this one.
Yeah, this is the one where I think you have to kind of lean to the other side of the street. That kickoff return from UCLA, I think just deflated whatever type of enthusiasm, momentum USC had. It was gone. And from that point forward, you could just see the team just kind of deflate. And the final scoreboard reflected it.
Greg, go ahead. Your play of the game.
Well, I agree with Marc 200%. I thought it just let the air out of the bag. I was really disappointed in the coverage, but UCLA blocked it well. I watched it, and you have to give credit. But you would think at that moment of the game that everyone would be making sure that they are, in their lanes, not going to be blocked, and they let it get blocked. And that was certainly whatever last gasp USC had to really apply the pressure to UCLA went right out of the peristyle end and onto the freeway. It was kind of mortifying, actually.
I literally started clapping and laughing upstairs, and I had to stop myself because I was that embarrassed.
You guys know I love cheating on this kind of stuff, so I'm not going to pick one play. I'm going to go with a few, and ultimately it's USC gets the 2 early interceptions and scores 0 points off of it, and from that point you knew USC was in trouble because UCLA eventually was going to find their footing against this USC defense, and the points were going to come at some point. The fact that USC wasn't up 14-0 or 17-0 early after getting those 2 things, immediate red flag. UCLA forces the punt after the second one. They march down and score a touchdown. They're up 7-3, and you just thought, well, there it goes. I mean, UCLA is not going to turn the ball over 6 times in this game. SC's not going to get chance after chance after chance. And so when those 2 got squandered early, it felt like that there's the game. And this is going to be a major uphill climb for USC the rest of it. So again, I'm not picking one play of the game, although I do agree with you guys, that kickoff return, because it did feel when USC scored the touchdown there, it felt like, okay, SC was down 28-10 last year, and they came back and won that game. 28-10 again this year, although it maybe felt a little bit different, but that was one of those things where that comes back down the other way, and it felt like, okay, that kind of does it for here. Greg, let's go to our third thing, and this was what you anticipated seeing, what you expected seeing for this one, and it delivered.
Well, I tell you, of all the games that we've watched, this was the most expected of what I expected. I knew that USC's defense was, I don't know if the word is horrible, tragic, looked uncoached. But I knew they wouldn't stop UCLA's offense either on the ground, maybe in the air. But then again, you'd had to take into account how poor the secondary has been in the last several weeks. And you know what? You just kind of sat there and, I hate like crazy to sit there and say, be like Marc Kulkin, which I think is an insult to myself. But, the bottom line is Marc is absolutely correct about starting to laugh and applaud. It was so absurd to watch what UCLA was doing on offense. The missed tackle, it was everything we've seen for all the last couple of months. And, was it surprising? No, it was what you expected. And taking what you said, Eric, a little bit of sugar at the beginning of the game with the 2 interceptions, by DTR. You thought maybe maybe it's going to be, but you said, could they do this for 4 quarters? And obviously UCLA's offense proved, no, you're not going to do it for 4 quarters. And it exposed every single blemish that USC defense has had. And what can I say? There was no expect the unexpected. No, it was expect the expected. So that's my read on it.
Marc, your anticipated thing that came true. Yeah, 2 things. And you kind of touched on it earlier. Gary Bryant having a big game. The other thing that I anticipated, and it's not something I'm proud of, but you kind of knew when you're starting a freshman quarterback that you're going to get mistakes. But I anticipated, Jackson having a couple of mistakes, and I'm referring to as interceptions. So, yeah, it happened.
Yeah, the second one was tough because, again, USC's kind of coming back, and that's one where he throws it and kind of immediately tucks to the ground and is kind of hitting his helmet a little bit. Knew that had him maybe early, threw it late. That's double coverage and something where, again, maybe you don't see that from him next year or as a junior down the road, but definitely felt like one of those freshman mistakes there. You had to anticipate that UCLA was going to run the ball, and they finished with 260 yards on the ground. That's kind of the spot where I had between 250 and 300. Certainly, the guess was if they got things going, that's where they could end up, and that's what it was. And it wasn't early. They kind of chipped away, and then when USC is forced to play, they're playing 3 guys, 4 guys up front on that defensive line. The depth is just not there for USC this year, up front and in the linebackers right now. And it is that was tough for those guys. The USC defense is going to get kind of crushed as we go through and look back and see how they did. But those guys up front, that is a tough task to play as much as they're being asked to play against this kind of offense. I just don't know how you expect those guys to succeed when again, that's what they're being asked to do. So again, that's what we thought coming into it. And that's certainly what UCLA delivered. Mark, Greg just got done finished saying there were no surprises, but we're going to go to our fourth thing. And that is the surprise from this one. Maybe your unexpected thing from this one.
21.8 yards per completion. Figure out which quarterback was doing that. And these weren't, it's not like he was carving up USC. These were just blown assignments on defense. I mean, USC's defense actually, I hate to say they did a decent job, but when you look at the plays, the big play touchdowns, that's what they were. I mean, we mentioned it during when we did our show earlier in the week, right? Stop the run, make DTR beat you through the air. You saw what happened when he's under pressure, 2 interceptions. But then when USC's defense gets loose and you got your wide receivers running behind your cornerback with no safety help, you're going to get 21.8 yards per completion and a final score that read what it read.
Greg, go ahead. You're surprised from this one.
Well, my surprise is more anger. And I will tell you, this is a buildup from a previous game. Look, you know what? Whether they won, I don't want to say the score, but had it been into the 70s, how's that for avoiding it? I was really angry, not as a commentator or a columnist, but as a coach. I was incredibly incensed the last 2 minutes when Dart's still in the game.
Yep.
I thought it was the most malpractice of coaching. And I'm a coach, there's kind of a mafia thing. Don't say much about other people and their coaching, but it was so blatant for the second time. To me, it would be like going past a policeman twice and running a red light and saying, I could get away with this. They can't get away with this. Dante Williams, Graham Harrell are held totally accountable for allowing Jackson Dart, who gave it his best, took a savage beating, I might add. I don't blame him at all for this loss. He may be a better quarterback for it in the future. I will tell you that. But to have him in the last 2 minutes to take a chance. I mean, do I think they're going to win the next 2 games? No. Do I think they're going to be bowl eligible? Obviously not. But the point is, if I'm Miller Moss, and I'm Miller Moss's parents, or I'm Miller Moss's head coach in high school, and I'm going, you can't put him in for a series or 2 just to protect Jackson Dart. You got some explaining to do, dudes. And I just don't get it one bit why he was still in the game, considering he had knee surgery and he was taking the beating. What would happen if he had actually gotten hurt and couldn't play next week? What were we going to say? I don't know what his injury is. It's new to me. I just do what the head trainers tell me to do. Well, I have to say, I know I'm venting a little bit, maybe more than a little bit, but to me, it was a disgrace, and I'll leave it at that.
All right. Well, I almost feel bad following up on that. My surprise here, it goes more in line with Mark's, and that's that USC ran 86 plays to UCLA's 66 plays in this one. I mean, I anticipated that UCLA would kind of grind it out and grind it down, and USC was going to have to do really well with fewer plays against UCLA. UCLA finishes with 9.2 yards per play. USC's down under 6. That to me was the surprise that UCLA was able to just rip off chunk plays against the USC defense, and that's not even considering the 100-yard kickoff return. That's in there too. UCLA was the more explosive team in every aspect, whether it was hitting, whether it was running, whether it was passing, whether it was special teams, all of it. The more explosive team brought more juice to the sideline, to the Coliseum, to the field in all aspects. And that to me was a surprise again that USC couldn't get up for this game. If anything else, what we've seen kind of the last several weeks and all that, you could have brought something to this one, and it feels like the team just can't rally. They can't stop the slide down the mountain that started, way back at the beginning of the year. And Greg, I'm with you too. We were watching, Jackson Dart take those plays at the end when you could have just let the time run out and take a knee and not get him hit like that. You brought true freshman Brandon Campbell into the game, gave him a couple runs, but I believe there were some passes back there too, where now you're asking a true freshman running back who hasn't played this season to maybe pick somebody up in that situation, to not let Jackson Dart take those hits. And I also thought that was questionable to leave him in all the way throughout the game and make him kind of ride that out when you could have just sort of, okay, that's it. Or again, you get, Miller Moss some time there at the end of this one. So I think kind of on the same page with both of you guys there on the surprises. And that'll take us to our fifth thing. Mark, we'll go with you on this, and that's the biggest takeaway from this one. And we'll say the score again: UCLA 62, USC 33. If that helps tee you up for your takeaway.
So my takeaway is this: the players are already admitting that they're playing for next year. So if you're already in that mindset that you're playing, trying to improve for next year, subliminally, you're not playing this year. And you actually will. And I know it came across the wrong way, but after the game, Nick Figueroa was answering questions from the media, and that was his response. We're playing for next year. And I'm thinking, wow, Greg, you touched on it. And I mentioned this weeks ago. This team has won their last game. Because when you're playing with that kind of mindset, moving forward, the players, they don't trust the staff because you're not seeing rotations. Drake London is gone. So instead of him getting 10 passes a game, now Gary Bryant's getting 10 passes a game. Nobody else is getting any looks. So nothing's really changed. We're moving forward. This is what you're going to get next week against BYU, and then the following week at Cal. So this is who USC is.
Yeah, Greg, go ahead. Your biggest takeaway from this one.
Well, my biggest takeaway is I think Jackson Dart will be a better quarterback for this experience. I mean, he played a full game and a rivalry game. He got hit every which way and up. He made mistakes, but he bounced back. I like that. Could it help them in the next two games as they try to get bowl eligible? I think so. But that's going to be a very heavy lift for him to do that against BYU and Cal. But you can find a positive in a dresser drawer full of negatives. But I thought that it was a good learning experience for Dart. And I think when they get a coach next season, hopefully a defensive-minded coach, he will be better off for it in the long run. Not in the short run, but in the long run. And hopefully we'll see that against BYU next Saturday night.
Yeah, mine is, this is going back weeks and weeks and weeks. So it's not exactly the takeaway from this one, but it's been for a while that there are no answers for this team. And whether that's just going all the way back to years and years of recruiting where you are left with what you have right now on the defensive line, just in terms of depth and able bodies, and at linebacker too. Again, you've got, 2-3 guys that are playing and having to withstand against these rushing attacks that are being thrown at it. The takeaway is that there is not an answer. There is not going to be a fix. I think we saw it against Arizona State when things started going haywire. We saw it against UCLA when things started going haywire. That there really is nothing to do. I also think there's a takeaway here talking about Jackson Dart, where he becomes your USC quarterback most likely for the rest of this season, and then also going forward into next year too. I also think maybe there's a takeaway. We did not, we saw Drake Jackson on a snap early in the game on a third down, but did not see him for huge, periods of the game. And is that the last we've seen of Drake Jackson, is if he's not going to kind of push it and try to, get back in and maybe risk injury with his potential, jump to the NFL. So if you're looking at a last 2 games maybe of this season, if you don't have Keaton Slovis, you don't have Drake London, you don't have Drake Jackson, that is not the blueprint that USC had coming into this game. And again, those are all ifs kind of attached with that. But if that happens, it really is a bummer to see, maybe 3 guys kind of end their USC careers in that way. Again, hopeful Drake Jackson, can play in those next 2 games. But again, how we saw him kind of leave the field, really disappointed from this one. That's again one of the takeaways. So again, that's our look. That's our 5 things look back at UCLA beating USC 62-33 in the Coliseum in a game that was described as not fun by someone on the way out of there. So we will see everybody back next week after USC hosts BYU. But for tonight, this is Erik McKinney, joined as always by Marc Kulkin and Greg Katz. Thanks to everybody for watching and listening to We Are SC.